this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football. So tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
You know how it's never really about where you're going, it's about who you're going with? The right people can turn any drive into a great memory. That's something Toyota really believes. They design vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who make plans happen and bring everyone together. Inside, everything's built with passengers in mind. Comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that actually works so everyone can relax and enjoy the ride. There's room for the people, room for the stuff, and room for the moments that happen along the way. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
Matt Waldman is a Footballguys senior staff writer who's best known for his intensely detailed prospect work with his rookie scouting portfolio. He's been around the fantasy football industry for over 2 decades, he's a musician, and he's now a late-round perspective staple. These are his late-round perspectives. We just sent a bunch of humans the furthest spot away from Earth that any human has been, right? Out to the moon. And yet, it might still be less impressive than the rookie scouting portfolio length that you have each year.
Well, if they just needed a ladder, they could have told me. I mean,
right. How many pages is the portfolio this year?
1,267, and that's not even the longest one I've ever done.
I was going to ask that next. Yeah. Well, it was really funny because this year was the first year that we built. So I hired on Brandon Gadula, who I worked with at Number Fire and FanDuel. And we built out a new tight end model this year. And as a result of him helping me out now and me having more help in general, he wrote the tight end profiles for the prospect guide this year. And we always do, whoever gets invited to the combine is who we end up writing up. And of course, this year, more tight end invites than we've had since like 2004, I think it was. So of course, this is the year that we are introducing this new model and this new idea with the tight ends. And then we have, 27 pages worth of guys that we're writing up. But I mean, the rookie scouting portfolio, I mean, I'm assuming you're just in a cave for like months and then you just emerge and you're now, it released yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And you've now officially emerged.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels that way because March doesn't exist for me. It's literally it no longer is a month on my calendar. It's like February, and then suddenly there's sunlight.
Yeah, right.
But honestly, I mean, it's something I do throughout the year. So yeah. I'm working a lot throughout the year. It just gets super focused between late December and now. So it does feel that way, other than, walks with the dog and occasionally making time with my wife and I, and things like that. It's gotten a little more efficient over the years. So that's been helpful too. I mean, there was a time I was working 2 other jobs while doing this thing. And I that's why my hair is the color it is right now. And when I was 36, I had brown hair, Right. So the joke is my wife goes, "You look like Russell Crowe when I met you. You look like shipwrecked Russell Crowe." Or like, what was it? Go type up Russell Crowe Lost at Sea. And that's me on a bad day. It literally is. So.
So March Madness has a different meaning for you.
Yes. I used to be a big Georgia Tech college basketball fan in the 80s with Bobby Cremins and Mark Price and Dennis Scott and all of them. I haven't watched a basketball game since Dwayne Wade went to the pros.
Yeah.
That was, so it's like, it is a totally different meaning now, for sure. It's like, should I leave the house? What happens if I leave the house, but I don't have this thing done? Should I be walking my dog in the woods down these hills like I am at 56 and falling down these hills and laughing? Or should I be considering the fact that, I should probably get this book done before I start doing foolish things like that. I still do it, but there are implications when I fall down a hill and I go, yeah, in about 10 years, this might not be a good idea for me. And,
right.
And I'm putting my business at risk.
Yeah, true. Very true. So anyone listening, we're recording this on the 2nd. This is going to be going out a week later because I am taking a vacation next week. I'm getting away. Yeah.
Where are you going?
I got an email from a listener actually last week, and they're like, do you ever like take a vacation? Cause and the funny thing is that like I'm prepping for being gone next week. So I'm recording a couple shows so that there are still shows out there for people while I'm gone. I mean, I'm running a business. You have to to think through this kind of stuff. And, but yeah, we're going, my daughter's on spring break. We're going with a couple families down to Florida and just having a,
nice.
Beach and pool vacation, just hang out for a little bit. But the nice part about the prospecting stuff is that it is in the time frame, pre-draft, it is relatively timeless unless something like crazy off the field happens. So if anything like that happens over the next 6 days or whatever the case may be, you guys know that we're recording this now, and we didn't know that thing was going to happen, but hopefully nothing does happen. Right. Seems like the things that are happening are more in the yeah, right. Yeah, it's just more the random pro day stuff and people just talking themselves into circles on Twitter and all that kind of stuff,
That's right.
So look, you wrote this giant document, and I know that dumbing it down to a scale of 1 to 10 is absolutely insane. But look, when you look at this draft class for fantasy football purposes, and you look at the positions that we'll be drafting, and you can look at this from a super flex or regular, one quarterback league, how would you rate this class 1 to 10 if you were to just give it a general score of how talented and deep this thing is?
I'd like to joke 6.75, 6.854. No, it's Leo's. I'd say about 6.5, mainly because I think it's better than people are saying, because people don't understand. Like, you look at the running back class and they say it's trash. And from what I've discovered, looking at how I've graded out, like what an expectation is like starter value type of things. Mm-hmm. The difference between a great class and a bad class, from what I've observed of how people perceive it, is plus or minus one running back.
So, that's kind of true.
So it's kind of like, it's a trash running back class. Oh, so if one of those guys breaks out that we didn't expect, it's a decent running back class. And if one more guy breaks out, it was a great class. Okay. So then wide receiver class, it's not as high at the top. As it was the past 2 years, but I think the number of players who could actually still contribute statistically and have a fantasy factor is the same. So that's good. You have I believe there's a starting quarterback in this class who you could put him on a bad team, and like Caleb Williams can survive the bad team and actually be as I joked with Sigmund Bloom yesterday, he can actually be the thermostat and not the thermometer, of the team, and withstand all the harshness. And I thought that way of Caleb Williams from the beginning. I think that way of Fernando Mendoza now, even with the Raiders. Whereas I look at like the Cam Wards, CJ Strouds, Bryce Youngs, those guys that, like, depending on the year, in the first 3 years, it's either good or they're awful. And it's dependent on what's going on around them. And I think that, maybe Ty Simpson is more the thermometer, the highest end thermometer in this class, whereas Fernando Mendoza is actually the thermostat. So when you look at that, and then tight end, as we'll probably get into, is a whole other mess right now, because if you agree with Matt Harmon's new hire, Max Toscano, about the shape of where tight end is going, instead of us valuing the big oversized receiver who can run receiver-like routes, we might be going to valuing more of the big oversized fullbacks who can catch and run, but they don't have to do anything other than what Tucker Kraft does for Green Bay, which is block and drift out and go, oh, where is everybody? Well, let me go ahead and run. As JJ Watt said about Ty Warren, how's it feel to catch a ball and nobody's within 15 yards of you?
Yeah. Well, I think that, especially in retrospect and looking at last year's class, because I thought last year's class was pretty strong, while we were evaluating. And obviously, I think in in hindsight, it looks strong too. But I do think that the fantasy community in general, it does us more good than bad to not just look at the straight up production, obviously, that these guys are accumulating and instead ask the questions, well, how or why was this happening? And I think the dichotomy between Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren is such a good example of that, where Loveland played a much more traditional tight end role in that Bears offense. And I say traditional as in the pure pass catching / all around type, down the field in the seam type of role. Whereas Tyler Warren was not, he was doing the things that you're saying, that a Kenyon Sadiq or whomever might be more in that, in like the lower A dot stuff, or Tucker Kraft was your example, the lower A dot stuff, get them in space, let them do more after the catch. But the skill set is not the same, right? Like what they're bringing to the table. And I know we're immediately going to tight end, but I think it's a really important discussion to have. Is that what you're seeing at tight end this year, especially with the dichotomy and the difference between an Eli Stowers versus a Kenyon Sadiq?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that for me, what it is, there's 3 types of tight ends. We talked about the other 2, and I would put Colston Loveland as the unicorn because he can do it all. And it probably earned me most wanted posters on Indianapolis post offices everywhere in all the surrounding counties, talking about that online. But the fact of the matter is I've actually changed. I added an algorithm to my scoring to where I usually the RSP, I use my own analytics to study film and process through that to create a score. And how I rank them, it's called depth of talent. How well do they do the things that you expect the position to do? And I use the depth of talent in the past for tight end where I emphasized receiving, route running as essentially equal, and then blocking was about half that value of either one of those categories. And that's because for years it was big wide receivers. So I valued that more. Right. Now with the prospect of what we've seen happening, I've decided that maybe the best thing to do is to have that depth of talent score, but make one where I do an inline depth of talent score with inline tight ends. And I make the blocking equal in value to receiving, and the route running now is what blocking used to be for the other format. So I've kept both. I've kept the original scoring, but then I have the other one too, because that helps us say, all right, so now we've had the draft, and this guy went to a team runs a lot of base 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets. What could he offer as his upside? That'll be a more accurate way of doing it, because I still look at the same things. I still look at the same detail. I just value the scoring differently. That's all I have to change. And so as a result of that, with this tight end class, I feel like it's true. It's like if you look at the traditional look at where I have, Eli Stowers is my number 1 guy. If I look at it from the inline tight end look, Sam Roche is my number 1 guy from Stanford because of what he can do as a blocker and catcher. Yeah. And there's some guys that are kind of in the middle of either, but it's true. It's like where they wind up is going to matter. And you can see that may play out more, but it's going to be maybe not just this year, but in year 2 and year 3 where we have to look back and go, oh, okay, now that's how that's unfolded.
Yeah. I think that last year was a pretty glaring change. We've seen the shift in the NFL. Most of these shifts are relatively gradual. It's not like overnight a team just all of a sudden switches from a heavy 11 team to just being a 12 team. We kind of saw it with the Rams, maybe a little bit, like you can make the argument, but like league-wide trends, it's usually more gradual, right? Because they're reacting to too high, or they're reacting to these speedier, smaller defenses, and this is the way that now it's more run heavy, and usually that's this more gradual, change. And I think that when you look at the one team to the next, when you're evaluating the NFL, you're now seeing actually, and so, like, teams operate in a pretty different, unique, and distinct way versus what we might have seen 10 years ago. Like one team to another, like the Bengals might still run a ton of 11 or like whatever the case may be. And then you go to what the Rams did last year, or you go to some of these heavier 12 teams, And that alone makes, I think, tight end evaluation in particular a lot more nuanced than it used to be, right? Like, it's just completely different than, and look, I'm admittedly, like, I've only probably been strictly evaluating tight ends for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe. And then obviously we changed up the model this year, and I really dove in more this year than I have in years past. But I just think strictly from a personnel deployment standpoint and the way that teams are working, like a guy like Eli Stowers, is your eval of him he's not the best blocker, but he's a phenomenal receiver? Is that the TLDR of a Stowers for you right now?
I would say so. He's definitely the traditional move tight end.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then Sadiq being more, but then you also, this class is interesting too. You mentioned Roush, he's massive, right? This is Darnell Washington sized, tight end, and comparing him to Kenyon Sadiq, who's not that big, right? But he obviously has the athleticism and, tested through the roof at the combine. It's just so interesting to me how fit just seems so important at the position because of the different tight end sizes that we're seeing, the different tight end skill sets, the different ways that teams are deploying tight ends. Are you going to, I guess my question would be, I know that I'm just kind of brain vomiting here, but my question would be, is this a position now that you are even more landing spot and team specific than you otherwise would have been, maybe 7 or 8 years ago?
Honestly, I guess I've kind of always been that way because I remember back when studying Dennis Pitta or Aaron Hernandez or players like that and going, wow, get them on the right spot, or Jordan Reed. Yeah. And thinking, okay, what ends up having to happen is I used one formula usage. So I'd say I'm already becoming more nuanced in actual how I score it because of adding this eye depth score, or inline depth score. That kind of makes it official. But in the past, what I would probably do is I would rank them based on receiving heavy, route running ability as a higher end weight. And then I would say, well, in a good landing spot, Jordan Reed could really crush it, but, or if you have a team that runs a lot of play action out into the zone, Dennis Pitta was probably going to be a better player than you would expect. And you need to keep an eye on that. And so I would judge it independently that way. But now that I've kind of realized where we're evolving and heading, that there's two distinct ways, it just kind of makes it easier because you're studying those things in depth the way that you need to. If you're studying everything that a tight end could possibly do in depth, then if you've weighted two different ways of doing it, the way that the NFL realistically is deploying them, then you kind of have it covered. But at the same time, I can put it to you this way. What prompted the change for me wasn't just Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren, because those guys actually could run some semblance of routes beyond what they're asked to do, even though it looks ridiculous, from a standpoint, that people, when you tell people what you're saying, sometimes they misinterpret and say, Matt Waldman says that guy can't run a route to save us behind, but, he's just getting lucky catching the ball into these open spots, which is not what I'm trying to say. But when I saw AJ Barner, who is never going to be mistaken as a man-to-man route runner, to come in top 15 in fantasy. Yeah. Because he's so good basically posting up and he's a good blocker. And you suddenly see, wow, that, in a 2 tight end set, or how Harold Fannin was used. Even, and Fannin to me was a good example of that nuance, because, there are a lot of people who ran off that bandwagon as fast as they could when the combine numbers hit. Yeah. And when I looked at those combine numbers, I'm like, that's Sam Laporta. It's basically Sam Laporta. If he's used in an offense that has some similarity to Sam Laporta, he's going to be fine. And that's what happened last year. We'll see what happens this year with Todd Monken in the fold, whether that's going to change. But those are, I think that, you're to the long of it is you're, the nuances of that is going to force everybody to be a little bit more attentive to where landing spot matters. Yeah.
Well, from just an objective, evaluation standpoint, I know that, you seemed a little bit bearish, if you will, versus, let's say, where NFL mock draft database.com or whomever has Kenyon Sadiq. So talk about his game a little bit and what makes you like, talk about the pros and cons, because I think that I actually have seen, especially in the fantasy space, there's been a lot of discussion of like, hey, this guy isn't nearly as good as top 10 draft capital. I think a lot of people are in agreement of sort of that, or, top 20 draft capital, let's say, and that Eli Stowers, because like objectively and analytically, Eli Stowers has better, production metrics and age adjusted production, and seems to be, is more of the receiving type that we gravitate towards from a fantasy perspective. But talk about Sadiq and how you kind of envision him playing out in the NFL.
Well, I mean, when he's playing to his potential, he's going to draw mismatches as a big vertical receiver, okay, from H-back alignments. So he's going to get that Kenny Golladay early Chase Claypool kind of love as a big receiver who stretches things out. And there's some really good players buffering him that draw coverage away. So he gets the mismatch. But, as well as he tests as an athlete, it doesn't always translate to the field. He's not sudden as a route runner right now. He doesn't really understand how to cultivate that suddenness that you need to have to bait opponents. Most young receivers don't really have that unless they're one of the top, 3 to 5 receivers on the board each year. He doesn't earn, there's plays where he just plays slow. Like I've seen him on seam routes where he can't separate from linebackers, but I know how fast he is. And I'm thinking that makes no sense. But then he'll run a whip route or a pivot route, and beat the cornerback 3 to 5 steps midway through the stem. So when you see that, you go, all right, is he overthinking certain things? Is that because he's overthinking what the coverage looks like and he's not familiar with what he's doing? Is it that he's just lackluster in his application and consistency of doing the work? But in addition to that, you look at like, he tips off breaks to defenders. He has undisciplined moves where at the top of his stem, he's not selling the route well enough at the top of the stem. He doesn't drop his weight deep enough, with certain timing routes to earn that compelling separation. So you have a lot of little technical loose ends that can get magnified when you face tougher defenses, in terms of the personnel and the scheme. And you have a quicker reaction time in your offense that's expected of you to perform. And when you have to start thinking, your game slows down, your error rates go up, your technique is what goes away. Even things that you knew how to do and you could do it like easily 9 times out of 10 in practice, but now you're overthinking something else. Suddenly you look like the little girl trying to catch a ball for the first time. You see it every year and it happens. Anytime you're in a performance medium like that, these types of things happen. So he has some catch flaws too, like that play out as lapses. So he's one of those guys that I expect to figure it out, but I don't expect him to be an instant star unless he's just put in a plush situation where it's just like, do these 2-3 things, easy stuff, and you're going to be wide open and it's good. So he's just got, there's a few players in this tight end class that have high upside, but a trap door. And he's one of those guys that if the GM disagrees with the coach and the GM is like, I know you're running 12 and 13 personnel, but I like this Kenyon Sadiq so much. He's such a playmaker. I'm going to draft him, and now you've got to make him work. Yeah. And the coach is ticked off, and I've had a scout literally laugh with me because I said this about Sam Laporta. I was like, he's got to be picked in the right spot, because if the coach and the GM don't agree, there's going to be a pissing contest where the GM force feeds the coach, and the coach tells this guy to fatten up so that he can play on the line. So now you have an overweight dude who can't block on the line, and then he points to the GM and says, "See, I told you this guy can't play. He wasn't worth it." And I literally had a guy who worked for multiple teams say, "This was so funny because I've seen this play out multiple times in the league. It's bad." Yeah. So that's the problem with Sadiq, is the upside's there, but there's a lot of little trapdoors and loose ends that he's got to tie up.
Yeah. And then with Stowers, what do you see with him? Because I think, again, the TLDR for him is great receiving profile. Looks like he could play wide receiver, but doesn't necessarily have the blocking chops is what I mean, analytically, like I said, age adjusted production looks better than Sadiq. Obviously tested unbelievably well. It's kind of crazy that we got Sadiq's athleticism numbers and Stowers the same year, because they were both like just unheard of, just 99th percentile type stuff. So what are you seeing though with Stowers?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a good pass catcher who steadily improved how he tracks the football. As a former top end quarterback who tore his ACL his junior year in high school, he had offers from Georgia and Big Ten schools. He was really good. And he ended up at New Mexico or New Mexico State. I don't remember which one, but he had a labrum tear. So he wanted to keep playing. So they moved him to tight end. So he understands zones probably a little better than the average tight end who's still learning them. He's very good in open space. He's a great decision maker. He is he's physical and he's good at tight coverage catches, which is really nice for a player who you've got to ask if he's going to 12 and 13 personnel, is he better than the wide receiver 2 on that team? Right. Because that's what he's got to be meaningful as a fantasy player. Yeah. And you'd say, while the numbers are good in terms of his athletic ability, there's also a lot of tight coverage plays. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of tells you, is he going to be able to separate in the NFL at the level that he needs to? Yeah. Or are you going to have a quarterback really trust him? As a blocker, that's going to be the pivotal part of his game, as you mentioned. I think he's going to have difficulty with larger defenders in the NFL, even like strong side linebackers, definitely ends. At this point, he can drive some defensive ends into traffic when he takes the correct shoulder, when he's like backside, and there's certain blocks that he can do. But I would say he's someone that at his size, he's probably maxed out. So you're looking at him as more of how Travis Kelce blocks, mm-hmm. More backside, the type of stock blocking that you see, double teams, maybe a lead blocker in some areas. I would say that guys like Stowers, Michael Trigg, and Kenyon Sadiq, they all have the athletic ability to become big play weapons. And I'd say Trigg and Sadiq have more of it. Mm-hmm. But I'd say Stowers is the more complete route runner and pass catcher and has a lot fewer lapses in his game. So I think he could become a future starter, but you need him to be on an 11 team. Yeah. 11 personnel team.
That makes sense. And then I'll just throw it out there. Like, is there another tight end that, outside of those two? Cause it seems like from a consensus standpoint, people are all over the place as who their tight end 3 in this class is, or just like it's just, there's no consensus outside of those two. Do you have a favorite, or is there anyone that's a value that you just want to toss out there so that in 3 years you can say, I told you so?
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm laughing because, I've never been a PFF grade guy. No one, I think, PFF has has advanced the conversation of football in a lot of respects. Yeah. So all props to what was going on there. But rarely would I say that I aligned with a grade from a player in certain ways. So when I watched Carson Ryan of BYU and studied him and said, pound for pound, this is the best blocker in the class. I watched him take on Miami's defensive ends and hold up pretty darn well. He takes great angles with any kind of block. He knows how to set up larger or smaller defenders so that he can get position on them. He can punch. He has good technique. And then on top of that, I've seen this guy at UCLA, Utah, and BYU. And every time I've seen somebody go downfield to him, and oftentimes throw him open downfield where he's covered. And then at the last moment of the catch point, Ryan earns position in the way that like Ladd McConkey earns position late in the catch point on certain plays in the red zone. With Justin Herbert, where you have to have trust like that. Yeah. And I've thought 6'4", 250 is kind of a tweener between a big guy and a little guy, probably more of a little guy. He's not super fast, but makes every block, catches the ball really well, catches it against tight coverage extraordinarily well, runs reasonably well after the catch. and he works open. He's like that safety blanket you can work in the vertical game and get lost in the zones, and he can do what Mark Andrews can kind of do. But my comp for him is Jake Ferguson, who's another tight end I liked, who you go, probably a career tight end too, but if he gets on that starting lineup, he may never give up the job.
Yeah, and not only that,
he's too reliable.
And exactly. In the right environment, those guys can be valuable, and for no one looks at Ferguson as like, man, this guy's lighting the world on fire. But in the right environment, in that Dallas offense, it's like, yeah, he can be a valuable fantasy piece.
And that's what, to me, Carson Ryan is. And he's my TE5. And if I used my 12 personnel run heavy in depth, he'd be tight end 3. Because of the fact that he blocks his ass off. I mean, even for that size, that's not big, but man, put him on the wing and let him be the guy that works across the line, have him be a fullback every once in a while, have him lead, and he's killer. So, and the fact that he can catch and he can run reasonably well too. Sure.
I love it. There's the name, the Matt Waldman stamp of approval of the dart throw tight end. Let's move on to running back. You mentioned that you thought it was probably a better. I also want to say that I think that in the general consensus, like, cause people are always asking me like, hey, is this a good class upcoming, in like March in like November or whatever. And I'm not even doing much prospecting work. And like, I'm very casually watching stuff. And then in January, once that hits, that's when I really, turn things around. But there's always the questions of like, hey, how good is that 2027 class? How good is that 2028 class? And you can definitely give an answer, but I also think that we just get stuff wrong a lot, and we should be open to that being the case, even for this running back class. Analytically, I would say that it doesn't look great, the running back class, but I don't want to close the door on there being players that end up emerging. Now, one player who almost definitely will emerge is Jeremiah Love. Just given draft capital itself and the investment that a team's going to make, he's more than likely going to be very fantasy productive. But my question to you is like, how special is he as a prospect? Is he Ashton Genty / Jahmyr Gibbs / Bijan Robinson type level? Is he better than them? Like, where are you at with Jeremiah Love?
I think he's in that tier of those guys. Yeah. And that's enough. Like, I still have Ashton Genty a little bit higher, but not by much.
Right.
And if he gets a better fit, he could blow Ashton Genty away in statistical production early on. Yeah. So he's in that tier. So if you're going to trade and you want to trade Ashton Genty to get the rights to this guy, I mean, if that's what you want to do, I don't have a major argument for you, even if I like Genty a little bit more.
Right.
But Jeremiah Love, I mean, he reminds me a little bit of Reggie Bush when Reggie Bush was at USC before he overthought everything in New Orleans and had to be the hero. Mm-hmm. So I would put him above Reggie Bush, and just below Alvin Kamara. Like, I think Alvin Kamara is a player that he could eventually become, like, aspire to be. I don't know if he's ever going to get there, but it's pretty darn well, dynamic, flashy for sure, has more power than you'd think. He really runs with good contact balance and ability to break tackles. And so, yeah, I see a good role for him. I just think that we're looking at someone who maybe can have time where can be a little more, little better with certain decisions. Mm-hmm. He has some lapses with patience, but I think that they're just lapses. They're not habitual issues. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be one of those things in the preseason where he's feeling something out and people go, see, I told you he was a bust because he made like one bad play. The expert film watching that's out there, that happens when that happens, but it gets like 1 million clicks. That'll be the type of thing that will probably happen, but he's reliable with the ball. I mean, he's only had a fumble in 499 touches.
Yeah.
So that's great. So I would be happy with him as running back 1. I'd be happy with him as one of my top 3, top 4 picks overall. And if you chose him as your number 1 overall based on your build strategy, all of that, I understand.
Yeah. All right, now let's get into. I don't want to spend too much time on Love, just because we all know that he's good and stuff. What I really want to do is just talk about your RB2, your current RB2, and my RB2, which is Emmett Johnson, because he obviously didn't test super well. He didn't have like a crazy 40, didn't have this crazy RAS, et cetera, et cetera. I don't care that much about that, because when I'm writing my prospect guide, I'm watching these guys while I'm doing it so that I can at least match what my amateur eyes are seeing to what the data is saying, and also be able to talk about these guys competently and not sound like a moron when I talk to someone like Matt Waldman on the show. And so with Emmett Johnson, I wasn't expecting like this 4.45 40 when he got to the combine to begin with. And then the other thing that has been interesting to me, I brought this up a lot, is that he was the only running back that did the 3-cone at the combine. And people are like dinging him because it was like a 20th, 25th percentile type number. But to me, I'm almost thinking to myself, like, teams might actually enjoy the fact that he did this, because he's showing that he has, he's a competitor, and he wanted to do everything, and he did everything. The reason that the data loves Emmett Johnson, and why, I mean, look, to be completely fair, I fall in love with this archetype pretty regularly, but analytically, I see a spectrum of, yes, maybe like a Michael Carter type or something like that. But also, I think this is an archetype of like Aaron Jones. And I'm curious if you see that as well, given the pass catching ability. I mean, his pass catching numbers are like 95th percentile type stuff. Like, they're very, very strong when you adjust for age and program strength and such. But it does kind of like, you can kind of get into that Aaron Jones archetype and career trajectory. And that's really enticing to me.
Oh, I agree. I think there's a few players who fit that Aaron Jones archetype in this class. I didn't put Johnson there, but I see the lane, and I can see how that could be used that way. I saw other players, but more because of physical ability of that I'm studying. Because when you talk about the combine, look, relative athletic score is a nice layer of information, and it's an entertaining layer of information, but I could care less about the percentile of the guy. If you tell me, oh no, he's in the 32nd percentile at this number, but you're telling me that the minimum value, the minimum number that I need for him to be a starter is the equivalent of the 8th percentile.
Right.
Then why do I care that he's 30?
Agreed. It's very much a, like, I've been throwing this name out there, and I feel like he's just catching so many strays because of me, but it's like, are you Elijah Holyfield? Okay, you're not. Okay, good, because he ran like a 4.75 or something like that, and it just was bad. Like, there are guys where you're like, okay, almost definitely not going to pan out because the athleticism is so poor. But something like RAS, and this is nothing, like, it's fine if you are into that stuff, whoever's listening. But I've tested a lot of stuff. The only thing that I kind of care about is speed score, weight adjusted 40. But even when doing that, I think people listen to that and they take it really far, and they assume that I'm saying like, oh, Mike Washington is now good. And it's that's not what I'm saying at all. It's more so that, like, there is a small change in the way that the model scores these guys based on this thing. But there are other areas of a player's game that can make up for a ding with speed score, or vice versa.
I call them compensatory factors.
Right. It's just another piece of the puzzle. Yeah. It's honestly a pretty small piece of the puzzle compared to the other stuff that I'm looking at.
Yeah. I mean, I use Devin Singletary as an example. He's slow. Yeah. He's small. He's not very quick. The only thing that he actually does well is see the field and make good decisions. And that's really a big part of being a running back. Now it doesn't mean that he's a high end starter, but he certainly has some fantasy value that you have to keep him available as a potential roster add in situations. And that's way better than what the numbers would actually make you think, because you would think he wouldn't make the Canadian football team with what he's doing, or, my backyard league, in my, but that's the thing, is that when you look at Emmett Johnson, the other thing is we have to discuss this with the combine. Brandon Angelo, who's my podcast partner on Going Deep, on my podcast, he is a trainer of athletes, of pro athletes, and he's a former running back and track athlete at Purdue. Mm-hmm. He raced Chris Johnson in the, at one time, like in the meet. Yeah. And they all laughed at him until he basically made them feel his tailwind. But Brandon was talking about the first time we had a show, and we ended up doing this for a while. He said, you realize that the combine measuring device for these times is like second or third tier in terms of what could be used. And that the variation of times is something like 0.25 seconds. And you're like, that's the difference between an elite guy and a free agent, the way a lot of people look at stuff. Yeah. So we have to understand that the NFL is using a cheaper version of the measuring that they could be using.
Interesting.
So that's an issue. And then on top of it, the player I compared Emmett Johnson to as the aspirational player is Dalvin Cook. And the reason I did that isn't because of production. He's a better receiver than Cook probably showed. But I remember back in the day when I was evaluating Cook, and all of a sudden everybody was going off the bandwagon from him because of his spark score and his vertical and his 3-cone drill. Yeah. So I'm watching his tape, and I go, when has this guy ever made a lateral cut? When does he ever actually cut? I've seen curvilinear bend, but I've never seen a cut. And when he does move, you can go on YouTube right now and you'll see plays where his feet do this, like he's a rock'em sock'em robot, like turning, and before he changes direction. It's the weirdest thing, but he doesn't rely on that. So why am I going to ding him on a thing designed to measure change of direction ability with cuts? Yeah. Like you're actually mimicking someone cutting, and he doesn't cut. So I just threw that out and said, this guy's a good prospect. I'm not worried about all that. And then you look at other players who were on this list of who had poor 3-cone drills in recent years. Kenneth Gainwell looked pretty good last year. He's not great, but
Gainwell was one of the 3 comps for Johnson in the prospect guide this year. For me.
See, there you go. And he's a good all around player. Yeah. And you can see what he can do behind a decent blocking scheme, and he's been praised wherever he goes. Cook, 7.2 second 3-cone drill.
Yeah.
What about Chris Carson? 7.53 3-cone drill. Carson's a tackle breaker. He was a big time tackle breaker. So is Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson's he's a very good tackle breaker with what you're looking for against linebackers and safeties. So also Johnson can cut. So I've actually seen him make plays where he cuts well. But what's important about him is that he processes the game fast. He understands, he looks at things pre-snap, and you can see that he's likely either counting the box number, or he's understanding what certain keys that he's looking at that helps him understand where the quick cutback's going to be. And it's, you can have Jay Ajayi, cutback ability and quickness, or who was Bell, like Kenyon Drake's level of skill. Yeah. But the way he processed the field was so slow that he would literally concuss himself ramming into the backside of a blocker because he couldn't put it all together. Emmett Johnson doesn't have that problem. He sees things fast. He has quick solutions for them. His feet and his eyes are coordinated. You see it with the movement. You see it repeatedly with the success that he has from down to down, play to play, to what you're expecting him to do within a blocking scheme, and when things are disrupted, and how he can manage that. So, I love looking at the data for certain things for athletic ability, but there's a time that you have to understand when either to throw it out, when to kind of mitigate the value of it, like you talked about, and when to look at it and go, okay, maybe I need to go back and watch what I scored here.
Yeah, well, what's interesting with that too is a segue to Mike Washington, where Washington tested on, the 40 was insane. I mean, he was a crazy athlete. I think if you were to look at RAS, I'm assuming he would be really, really high, if not one of the best that we've seen, historically within that metric, or the totaling of the metrics. The thing though, for me, that I've had a pretty hard time with is that I would imagine Mike Washington's draft capital rose. We don't know, because we don't know where teams were before the combine, right? So if you make the assumption that it rose a little bit because teams are semi-irrational with some of this stuff, especially a wide receiver where there's an inverse correlation among like top 100 wide receivers with with speed and production at the NFL level. But with Mike Washington, the thing that's really crazy is that, yeah, it's this big body dude who ran like a 4.33 or whatever it was, but his explosive run rate is kind of bad. Like a lot of when you look at the advanced numbers, they don't match what you saw at the combine. And that gives me a lot of fear. I don't want to say anxiety because that's too strong of a word. I'm not really anxious about what Mike Washington's going to do at the NFL level. But I do wonder what you're seeing with Washington. And if you saw that, I think his final season was definitely the best season that we saw from him. And we saw a little bit more of those big plays and such, and that athleticism translating. But overall, it's still a questionable profile for me.
I would agree. He has a score for me that places him in a tier where you're a rotational starter. Basically mean you're coming off the bench as a committee back, maybe the B back to an A back who's the guy who's getting most of the value, but you could probably have some fantasy value when you're closing out games or have a specialized role where maybe you can score. But, I'm not sure he's going to ever reach that develop into a starter. Yeah. And there's two reasons for that. First reason is that he fumbles the ball once every 51 touches, which is awful.
Yeah.
Awful. Now this is not a straight up correlation because I haven't done enough with the study, but I still think it's notable enough to just share is that I looked back at 10 years of RSP data of fumblers, of fumble rates in college and looked at those backs and decided how many of them went on to deliver fantasy production, top 36, top 24, top 12, top 3. And let's see what the percentages were over that 10-year period. 10% delivered top 36 production once in their career, and that's a low number considering that it was 1% for anyone who got like running back one value, like high end running back one value. So it's very rare. Now there's a lot, that's messy data because there's a lot of other factors that could be involved with that. But what I have found is that it's hard for players sometimes to improve upon those things. And we always remember the exceptions. Tiki Barber, great example of that.
Fingers crossed, Bashal Tutin, right? Yeah,
Bashal Tutin, we're crossing our fingers. Certainly Sony Michel, but then he got banged up and really couldn't become the player that he was capable of being. But when you look at that, that's a concern. And it's not like Damon Claiborne by contrast had 7 fumbles last year. But if you look at the work rates of how much touches he got over the other 2 to 3 years that he's played, and his fumble rates were low.
Yeah.
This was you could look at this as potentially a bad year. Not that he's got a real problem with it. Whereas Mike Washington, every year his fumble rate was bad. Yeah. Every single year. So that's a big one. The other one is this. Do you remember Isaiah Spiller?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Like Texas A&M, big back, pretty good speed, there. People saw as promising. Isaiah Spiller didn't make it, in my opinion, probably from one level is that while he had the ability to become more, one of the things that he did that annoys the hell out of coaches is when it's time to drop the pads and accelerate through contact. Well, most running backs these years don't accelerate through contact like they used to. The last really good back who did that was probably Leonard Fournette, who really did it at a high level. Rudy Johnson used to do it very well, even as a not a great athlete version of a running back. But if you're not doing that, you at least need to be facing the target that you're going to have a collision with. And your hips need to be downhill into the target. Your pads need to be downhill into the target. Mike Washington's like a scat back who turns his pads away from the contact as it arrives against all 3 levels of the defense. It's not every play. You've seen exhibits of good pad level, but it is not lapses. It's more habitual than it should be. And so when you do that, well, like your hips are no longer downhill. So your power base is mitigated. Sometimes they're sideways. So now that's even worse. Your knees aren't high. Your feet don't get high. So it's harder to pull through reaches and wraps. And now the ball's exposed more because you're upright, while you're dealing with traffic.
Yeah.
And the and NFL defenders are all sharpshooters at getting the ball. So I'm with you just on those things alone. Like if he corrected his ball security, he'd be a borderline starter on my grade, but still not quite there. But with the ball lapses, that's an issue. And there are some things with, just decision making that can be a little bit better, but I wouldn't be making as big of a deal out of this if it, compared to the pad level, because pad level is hard to correct.
Yeah, I mean, look, advanced data backs this up, right? I mean, if you look at, again, I said the explosive run rate. I'm looking over at database stuff, like 22nd percentile explosive run rate. Okay, that's fine. It's not the hugest deal in the world because there is some noise to that at least. But like avoided tackles per attempt, 12th percentile. For that side, like you genuinely and generally don't see this archetype of player ranked so poorly within a metric like that, and it's scary. Yards after contact per attempt, 16th percentile, it's just a little scary when you bring the athleticism profile and the size and you're like, this looks like this guy was created in a lab to play running back, like that, but it just hasn't translated seemingly.
Who's the guy that everybody said was a bowling ball with knives and cleavers? Travis Henry way back in the day.
Oh yeah.
It's like if they, hid all the utensils in the drawer and hollowed out the bowling ball. I mean, it's just it's tough. I don't, he has moments where he actually shows what he is, but that's the problem. Michael Bush was a player I remember learning way back in the day, former Louisville guy.
Huge.
I learned so much early on listening to Chris Spielman talk. Great linebacker, very heady for the game, but what he taught about running back play, just listening to him talking about, I remember watching D'Angelo Williams and Michael Bush. They were playing each other, and Patrick Willis was on Ole Miss as well, but playing Memphis. No, it was Ole Miss and Louisville. That's what it was. Maybe I had that mixed up because it wasn't Memphis Patrick Lewis. But I saw it would have been Memphis and Louisville. What it was I was watching. I forgot. I was listening to something about Patrick Willis.
To be fair, recently. this is like 20 years ago.
This was 20 years ago. But they're a great contrast because if you go watch D'Angelo Williams, he's 210 pounds and 5'9", so he's basically a turkey sandwich away from Emmett Johnson, Right. Whereas Michael Bush is pretty much closer to what you'd see from
he was like 230.
Washington.
Yeah, he was
230.
Yeah.
And all game long, Chris Spielman is pointing out D'Angelo Williams runs like the size of Michael Bush, and Michael Bush runs like a scared version of D'Angelo Williams in terms of size. Yeah. And you could tell he was so frustrated with watching Bush because he could see what this guy could be and wasn't doing it. And it was it was a good lesson, but that's the example is that he's kind of a Michael Bush type of player in that respect who's got to get better at it.
So there are two guys that I definitely want to talk about, two running backs. One of them is Jadarian Price, and analytically it's just tough to get there because it's such a projection, right? Like we can explain away why his production looks the way that it does, right? Of course, he's playing behind Jeremiah Love, but also that just forces a larger projection. And I would assume from your perspective, there's still got to be a lot of projection and forecasting going on for a player like Price, as opposed to someone who has 800 college carries that you can at least see a larger sample of what he's doing. And not only that, but Price coming in certain parts of the game or whatever the case may be. It's just a different type of sample. So right now I've seen mock drafts. I remember seeing a mock draft a couple of weeks ago where someone had him, a big name in media had him at the end of the first round of this draft. And it's really been hard for me to get there for obvious reasons, but I need you to either solidify that stance or say, hey, look at it this way too.
Yeah. I'm as running back 6. Okay.
So you're not pushing me. You're not pushing me off.
I'm not pushing you. No, I'm not. I think, I don't think he's, Felix Jones, Rashawn Johnson, Sony Michel in terms of how the outcome may go. It may turn out that way. He could join it, but I think he'll transcend that list. It's just that I think that running back 2 through running back 6 is in the same tier. It's just that Emmett Johnson is in the same tier. but he's at the high end of the tier.
Yeah.
Whereas Jadarian Price is in the lower end of the tier.
I have the exact, seriously, it's like pretty similar because there's just a big group that, you know, there's going to be things that happen that you dictate one way or another, I think, once the draft goes down.
Yeah. I think he's scheme versatile, like in terms of zone versus gap, but he doesn't take creative liberties, which I like. He finds cutback lanes. He's creative. He's mobile with his hips to be able to adjust his feet and to be able to turn it 90 degrees efficiently. So there's a lot of things that he does well. The deceleration strong. He's got some issues with his footwork where when things go off script and he doesn't have an answer, his feet go really wide and now he can't change direction with any explosion and he's stuck there and he's not finding solutions. So there's some things with that. I'd like to see him add some weight. If he can add some quick twitch muscle to his frame. Yeah. That 10 to 15 pounds, maybe that will help him increase his speed a little bit more. But if he doesn't, I still think he could be a productive running back too. It's just that, you know, the cutback issues, there's a little bit with some cutback issues that he has. He manages the game well, but, you know, I didn't see anything that really, like, power was fine, but there was nothing that was super special about his power. He had some decent contact balance, I would say. Blocking, you know, overall, you know, it's improvable, but he's still got a little bit of work there. His fumble rate was low. It was not great. I mean, it was like 1 per 63. Which again, 61 is the line. Yeah. To where you're like, good for me, good or bad. So the fact that he's closer to the bad end of that is a bit of a concern. And that's probably what dropped him the most is his ball security. Did
you see him as a decent receiver? Like that's another thing where it just, I mean, the sample for that is just so tiny. There's just not much work of him playing that, you know, catching the ball out of the backfield. Is that a concern for you at all? Because to me, if there's a concern for Jadarian Price as a receiver, then I just don't, from a fantasy perspective, right? Because we know that pass catching is just important.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult to buy into that if we assume that he has like a decent price, right? Just given where he might go.
The tough part about this is that when I find how you evaluate a player and what you actually see versus how the NFL perceives the player can be different, because I looked at Jonathan Taylor and going, I know he's had very few targets at Wisconsin. Sure. Or Melvin Gordon even. And both of them could catch the ball well. Sure. And they got open and they made really tough plays. But then it comes down to route running too. And then teams are like, can he be a second or third level route runner? Yeah. And they don't use him much that way, but that's the case. Or like Aaron Jones, who's a fantastic receiver.
So good.
But would they please use him more often? Right. The way he could be used. But Price, you know, he flips his hips well for flat breaks. He's got good speed turns. He's got some footwork movement to be able to set up some routes and some hand counters. So you can see that he's developed some of those skills that might help him with some underneath routes against linebackers or safeties. So that's pretty good. He can drop his weight to decelerate fast, and he shows it on the top of stems and routes like hitches. So that's pretty good. Most running backs, though, you don't see that. Most of the time you just see him. Can they get open in space and underneath zone and know where to settle and work with the quarterback? And he does that. Catching the ball, he's prone to clap attacking the ball. Okay. But that's with overhand position when it's usually away from his frame or above his frame. And even wide receivers have some of those problems. But I would say overall, he's a competent pass catcher, but is that going to make him a standout to where teams go, we're going to lean on him? And I'd say probably not.
You know how it's never really about where you're going? It's about who you're going with. Like, the destination could be totally average, but if the right people are there, it becomes a great memory. Toyota really gets that. Toyota designs vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who bring everyone together and somehow make the drive part of the fun. There's room for all the stuff that comes with togetherness: luggage, golf clubs, camping gear, plus comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that lets everyone relax. And Toyota's lineup makes it easy to find your match. The RAV4 is perfect for everyday adventures. The Grand Highlander brings serious space for up to 8 with generous legroom and expansive cargo space. The Highlander also has space for up to 8. It's ready for big moments and spontaneous ones, balancing style and flexibility. And the Sienna is built for everyday life. Carpools, road trips, snacks, spills. And it even has a built-in vacuum for when things get a little too messy. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
For adults with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms, every choice matters. Tremfya offers self-injection or intravenous infusion from the start. Tremfya is administered as injections under the skin or infusions through a vein every 4 weeks, followed by injections under the skin every 4 or 8 weeks. If your doctor decides that you can self-inject Tremfya, proper training is required. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
One player who did have a pretty decent pass catching profile and is bigger than Price, probably more athletic if he were to test, but he broke his foot, at the Senior Bowl. Hopefully we get a little bit of something. He hinted at maybe something happening in April. I don't know. I don't think their pro day has happened yet, but Nick Singleton out of Penn State. I've seen, it's funny because I probably just like you're probably not listening to the noise at all while you're doing RSP, right? And I'm doing no consumption of anything while I'm doing the prospect guide. And then once I'm done, I'll look at rookie rankings or I'll look at mock. I look at mock drafts just for the draft capital input, but I'll start reading into what people are saying and stuff. And this is the look at Nick Singleton right now, is that the fantasy community and the analytics community like him a lot more than the other side does. The more people who are not necessarily digging into the numbers as much. And, I will say that he is one of those players, one of those running backs analytically that does look pretty good on paper, but then you start to look at comps and you're like, oh, these are all a bunch of guys that look good on paper who didn't pan out in the NFL. Like a CJ Procise type, or, these athletic, Tevin Coleman even you could probably throw in there as that kind of player. And so I'm curious, you seem to be more bullish than what some others are seeing with Singleton. And I'm curious what you're seeing because it will make me feel a little bit better about some of the comp stuff that I've been seeing, with him.
Yeah, I've got him comp to Melvin Gordon. That's basically the kind of back that I see him as. And if it really doesn't work out, for some reason I was off my rocker, then he was probably more of a Jeff Wilson type. Okay. But I think he and Quinshon Judkins were two of the top freshman running backs that year.
Oh, he was great.
In terms of production, Yeah. But when you watch his game, he played in a committee. They wanted to use a committee. They probably wanted to use a committee because that's how they keep their backs, so that they don't go somewhere else. So there's some of that going on. His coach got fired. He got paired with the quarterback who I just didn't think performed to his potential anywhere remotely to that. So there may be some production declines that have more to do with surrounding situation than him. He's not flashy, but he is smart. He's patient. He's scheme versatile. He's got good connection between his feet and his eyes, which means he's processing the game at a pretty decent rate. The acceleration's strong. The speed's good enough. I think he's going to beat, he beats defensive backs, even some cornerbacks. And he's going to hold people off to flip the field. If you can get 30, 40 yards when you break past the linebackers, that's enough for me. That's most of what you're going to get. He's well built. He pulls through reaches from all three defenders. I track reaches, wraps, and hits, with every carry, that I watch of them. And he's pretty good at that. Whatever the angle is, he bounces off linebackers when they hit him. He's going to force gang tackles. He shines as an outlet receiver. And the receiving game was why the numbers is probably why that pans out. He's
exactly,
and so he's got a versatile game. I think he's going to be a capable NFL starter, and he has a chance of being a better NFL starter than he did of being a college player. And I almost think that he's that player that got lost in the mix where one day we're going to go, well, yeah, he was good at Penn State.
Yeah.
Remember that first great year he had? He just kind of disappeared and everybody forgot about him. I think he could be a candidate for that for sure. I mean, like, if he works out, I don't think he's going to get there. And I don't even know if the guy I'm going to say where he's potentially could go is going to get there. But I loved Jonathan Brooks out of Texas.
Yeah, right.
He was fantastic. He's kind of in that Jonathan Brooks mold, just maybe not as dynamic as Brooks once was.
I love to hear it. Because I remember finishing the guide and being like, yeah, I really like Nick Singleton, and then like I'm letting things seep into my brain a little bit too much, I think, when it comes to his evaluation. And especially in a running back class that just doesn't have standout, like obvious, guys outside of Jeremiah Love. It's like, why wouldn't we, kind of go the Nick Singleton route? Are there any values at running back? Anyone that you want to just call out as I love to have you just throw out it could be a guy that you think is going to go day 2 or something, but I like the guys you dig deeper on, because you did this the one year and it was Kamani Vidal and we saw him become a guy last year when we were both in on him.
And last year I was on Kyle Monangai. So
that's right.
And so kind of look at that. A higher profile name is Damon Claiborne. I know he's 188 pounds, but that dude is a very good running back who I think if he didn't get dinged for his ball security a little bit late in his career would have been the clear cut number 2 for me and maybe even threatened a little bit more towards Love than people expect. He's like Shady Light, just like, Shady McCoy, LaShawn McCoy. I joke that he's like, Shady Light may have less calories, but still has that great flavor. I mean, like that's how he plays. He makes people miss. He has better contact balance than you would expect. So there's him. But now we're going to go way off the reservation.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
Okay. There's nobody that's going to be higher than most of these guys that I'm going to mention right now. Okay. Miles Montgomery of UCF.
Okay. I didn't even prospect him because he didn't go to the combine. So I'm interested to hear about this.
I love how he processes the game. His footwork and eyes, how he reads defenses before the snap to understand where the cutback lanes are, where the bounce lanes are, how to react to things when they go off script. He can run short yardage very well. He's just got underrated agility, strong decision making, both from a vision standpoint and a game management standpoint, because those are the two of the big factors in vision. He dictates contact. Every running back that we look at that's great, they are the first to make contact. Jamal Charles is a great example of a light running back who could take on a defensive tackle like at Oklahoma and win the collision, because he wasn't literally trying to push the guy backwards. He was just trying to make the first hit be as impactful as possible, but still in a way that he could spin off it immediately.
He could still go. Yeah.
It was kind of like shock and awe, like a smoke screen kind of thing. Yeah. And a lot of backs who are smaller are really good at doing that, because when you can dictate the chain of events at the collision point, the defender's always a step behind. And it's like you're a boxer who is dictating with the jab, and then you can set up everything off of that and confuse the opponent. And Miles Montgomery does that well. He's a good pass catcher, strong acceleration, maybe not strong speed. So I have him ranked way higher than you're going to pick him. And I'll always caution people about that. But I'm like, this is a guy that you should be basically taking on expanded offseason rosters as a free agent. If he gets drafted in the 6th or 7th round and it's an ideal depth chart, maybe you take a shot on him late. So that's one. I love what I saw from Miles Montgomery. All right. After that, I mean, I don't think Robert Henry is that much of a sleeper. I'll be talking about him more, but I'll say he's kind of in that Aaron Jones, James Cook kind of mode in terms of how he plays in style. Jamal Haynes was a slot receiver at Georgia Tech for 2 years, didn't even get a target. Okay. They put him at running back, and he's got a 4.5 140 at least at his pro day, and 4.25 20 shuttle, which is, if those numbers really are what they are, and from what I saw on field, they are. He's quick and fast enough. He's he runs with great pad level. Like he great enough pad level that he can win collisions with linebackers. And at 190, as a former slot receiver at Georgia Tech, look, I don't know about their training program, an hour away from where I am, but I know they can build the Iron Man suit. So maybe they've spent more time building the Iron Man suit than they actually have a training facility there. And I'm a University of Georgia grad, so I'm going to pick on them a little bit, but, that's the thing. Like if he can gain, Aaron Jones was 194 at UTEP.
Right.
And he's like, 208, 209, somewhere in that range. So if Jamal Haynes can do that with his pass catching ability and he runs decent routes, he's not like Adam Randall, who was a receiver, but now why he was a running back. Mm-hmm. Jamal Haynes is kind of more like, well, maybe the route running wasn't quite as good to be a slot receiver, but he can catch.
Yeah.
And I think Haynes is interesting that way. If you're looking for bigger, slower, but fast enough, maybe, who can just plow through people, SMU's TJ Harden is on my list. Because man, does he break a ton of tackles, and he's got that movement skills that you look at him and you go, could he possibly have people think, oh, he kind of reminds me of Arian Foster, but let's not go too far here. But
sure.
There's a little bit of that. Devon Booth of Mississippi State. Dave Kluge joked that he was, or he said, you remember Khalil Herbert? This is like Khalil Herbert. And I thought, yeah, actually, you know what? I'm going to steal that. That's a good one, because I actually have like Dalvin Cook and J.K. Dobbins as the top of his tier. And I don't think he's going to get there, but he's kind of a pretty good version of that. He's like, if Kyle Monangai was, more explosive and not as relentless in the open field. He's kind of that player, just smart runner who could probably deliver on third down. And is there anybody else that I really want to mention? And I'll say honestly, some of these guys, you could be naming names and they might not even be real human beings. And I would just nod along. Yeah. I'll give you two more just for fun, because it's like, this is the class, this running back class I'm laughing about, because I'm literally looking at them and like, I mentioned 4 guys who are in my top 15. Right. And they're not going to get drafted. And I know this. Yeah.
They're none of them, like the majority that you mentioned. Henry was there, but other than him, they weren't at the combine.
No, they weren't invited to the combine. So I'm laughing about this, but it's like, that's sometimes how it goes. These are guys that they're going to need an opportunity, and draft capital may not allow them the opportunity. Mm-hmm. But 2 more guys. LaShawn Williams out of Kansas. He's played Iowa. He's like 5'9", 218. Ran a 4.43 at the combine. When you watch him, he's one of those players that he's a bowling ball, strong agility, good decision maker. He was a high recruit out of Iowa. Didn't quite pan out. I think he lost his love for the game. And because the Kansas, trainers were like, he came in out of shape. We worked with him, and he was like a completely different athlete when we got through with him. And he was just unbelievably happy here. And now NFL players, you kind of have to deal with that you're on bad teams, and you have to be a mature professional. And maybe he got that turned around here and he renewed some things, or maybe that he needed extra motivation that might not work, but there's skills there. And then Kalen Black out of Indiana, he's played at Maryland.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't get an invite.
Yeah, I was too. He's ferocious for his size. Like, he runs hard. He is an accelerator into contact, which I like. He's versatile. He's going to be a leak receiver. He can give you nice plays in that area of the game. And I think he's one of those guys that probably is more in that Chester Taylor, Justin Forsett, name your backup who can give you 1,300 yards, but then you're never going to hear from him again. After that 1 year, because the team doesn't want to, they wouldn't pay him extra money, and he doesn't have the athletic ability that they desire, but just a darn good football player at 5'9", 208.
Love it. All right, let's move on to wide receiver. I agreed totally what you said at the top, where wide receiver, I don't think necessarily has, because we've seen some studs come out from prospecting standpoint, come out the last few years. this class just seems like that there are a lot of like above average solid dudes that are going to be able to, and some of them will probably hit that we expect, that we're not expecting to hit, and they end up just kind of panning out and working out. But from my perspective, there's just a lot of like above average guys that I'm not necessarily like getting like overly excited about, but I'm like, yeah, I could see this guy working out and like having a decent productive career. But at the top, you get a lot of Carnell Tate, Makai Lemon, Jordan Tyson, and you have it in that order. You have Tyson below, even below some other guys. But I think that all three of these guys bring something kind of different and unique to the table. And so I just want to briefly and quickly talk through where you're at with Tate, Lemon, and Tyson, who seem to be formed, and I'm not saying that you or I or whoever, individually would have it this way, but seem to be formed into a tier together, Tyson falling for a lot, different reasons, but like in the rookie drafts, ADP and the way that the community is kind of viewing them, they're kind of like a big three. But so I'm curious what you see with each of these guys.
Yeah. To me, Carnell Tate is by far the best talent on the board. In terms of if you're going to rate consistency and availability as a part of talent.
Yeah.
He's up there where he's in that tier to me of like Malik Neighbors, where you go, you're picking this guy and he's probably going to be your most productive receiver early, unless somehow he gets paired with a great number one opposite him for dumb luck, for that team. But he's a good route runner. He really understands how to run a route and set things up, especially with timing routes in the middle of the field or breaking back to the quarterback. We know that he plays well in the vertical game as a player, can go up and win the football. He has excellent technique, being able to go up and get your hands over your head or away from the ball and get your hands together so that you don't clap attack on the ball. It's very important. So, and I think he's a little better after the catch than people, say, mainly because the way he's targeted and how he's used, he's often in traffic. And so he makes good decisions in traffic. You get him on one-on-one a little bit more, we might see a little more from him. Makai Lemon, I think he's almost in a tier by himself too, but just below the Tate tier. He's an instant starter for me. But if I had to compare the two, I think a lot of people are like thinking about what's happened in recent years, which is slot receivers are big target getters. So he's a more valuable player than the split end that Tate end is, right. Tate is. But if we're switching, if we find ourselves with more 12 and 13 personnel packages, well, they may still use Lemon in the slot and put one of the tight ends outside if he ends up on a team like that. But he might also be forced to play flanker more often.
Right.
And then would I rather have Tate as a split end or Makai Lemon as a flanker? I'd take Tate. To that point, I don't mean to interrupt, but like sure. to that point, is this a situation? Because I've kind of viewed this as Tate will fit from a fantasy perspective. Yeah.
Tate will fit anywhere. We'll be able to play a role anywhere. Makai Lemon will be able to play anywhere, but I think that the variation in his fantasy production could differ based on what that landing spot is.
That's exactly it. That better way of summing it up than I was gonna. And that's for sure. I'm still in the weeds here a little bit sometimes, folks, as I get out of this. But it's true. That's true. And so if you're looking for the safer play, but maybe not as high upside as what Lemon could do in a very specific situation, maybe, you're looking at Tate. If you're looking at, if based on the fit that the upside is going to be fantastic, Amon-Ra St. Brownish, then you're probably taking him number one overall. And that's why I do a post draft, because that gives me a chance to be able to say, hey, I think Tate's significantly better overall as a football player, but Lemon is, Lemon's got the best fit to express his talents. So yeah, there's those two. And then go ahead.
Before we move on to Tyson, part of me also has been questioning if there's a possibility that Tate ends up, and this is, I don't think that we should be like super, like think of this in like a super intense way or extreme way, but Tate could end up being a better in real football player than fantasy football player? Like, is there that because it's not like he, of course he's playing with crazy competition at Ohio State, of course. And I'm not saying this as someone who doesn't like Carnell. I like Carnell Tate.
Sure.
Like, I think he's a really good prospect.
Sure.
But, there's, he had like a max 22% target share in college. And, obviously he's winning, doing a lot of stuff vertically that will help a team out tremendously. But then you wonder if, with like a Mekhi Lemon, like we said, we've seen now the guys who play slot and can go outside, the JSNs of the world, the Amon-Ra St. Browns of the world, when those situations really arise and allow them to be these target hogs, they dominate fantasy football. For years we've been hearing, Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't that good, but it's like, okay, but like this is the role he's playing in this offense, and he's clearly a very good player, and you could certainly argue that St. Brown isn't quite this good of a fantasy asset in another system, in another situation. But with Carnell Tate, like, is it possible that this is he's a great, great prospect. He's a great, great football player, and he's going to really help an NFL team, but maybe we don't see the 27% type target share, at the NFL level? Do you think that's like a possibility here?
It is a possibility. I would say that. I mean, he might end up being a career wide receiver too.
Right.
You're like, and there's a possibility that happens. There's also a possibility that he's essentially another type of player in the realm of Justin Jefferson.
Right.
And we're like, why do we overthink it?
Yeah, right.
But we need to overthink it at this stage. Yeah. It's one of those things that we don't know. So we're trying to anticipate what factors might lead to one or the other. So yeah, you're right. Now with, Tyson, what is it? Tyson Jordan?
Jordan Tyson. Yeah.
Jordan Tyson. I'm getting mixed up now.
I mean, it's two first names is tough.
Yeah. But he has a lot of loose ends to his game. In addition to the fact that he has a hamstring injury that hasn't healed yet after he had a tear with his knee, and it seems like he can't get healthy and stay healthy. That's an issue. But there's also just like, there's certain route, there's one thing about knowing all the tools that you need to have to be a good route runner. And then there's how do you express those tools in the right setting, the right time, and the right way. And all those things are missing with his game. He has moments where he does it well, but there's moments where it's like he makes moves that you need to see that are good technique, but he doesn't deliver it with the nuance that he should. So it doesn't even register to the defender that he was trying to trick him. It's almost like I joked that it's like a subliminal message almost. It's like Brad Pitt in Fight Club where he's cutting the tape up and he's putting in the lewd images and you can't see it. Something might have been unsettling to you, but it didn't change you. It didn't make you jump out of your seat. It didn't make you react in any certain way other than just in an unsettling emotional way. And Jordan Tyson's movement at the top of his stems or halfway through his stems where he should be forcing the defender off his spot, he delivers them so fast that it's like the defender doesn't even have time to react to it. So he's still moving in the correct direction.
Yeah.
Overall, he's got to learn that. He clap attacks some balls. He has some drops. He has these little loose threads where you can easily acknowledge and say, he's the most talented. He could be he has as much upside as any of the receivers ahead of him.
Yeah.
Like Tate and Mekhi Lemon, but he's the guy that has to prove more because he hasn't shown that he can do it at the level consistently without mistakes getting magnified in the NFL and creating more errors and then never getting there.
Yeah. Tyson's really tough for me because the model is obsessed with him. Like because he has such good age adjusted production. Like he's younger, right? Like he entered college younger. He immediately leads Colorado in receiving, as a freshman and, doesn't even play the full season. But then there's the medicals, and then there's a lot of these wasted movements that folks like yourself or Harmon are speaking about with him that definitely, like when I ranked them, I just put them in the same tier because I think there's enough subjective things that I can say, yeah, the model's saying this. And I do think that the upside is very certain. I do think the model leans more just having worked with it and knowing what it's looking at. It leans more looking at upside. It did the same thing with Luther Burden last year. We were both on Burden, but it certainly seems to lean that way. But it's really good to have the other perspective on Tyson because a lot of people agree with you. Like a lot of people are agreeing with you.
The difference with Burden and Tyson for me would be that Burden's upside was there is because I saw things that made me realize that this is a nuanced route runner, even though we didn't see it a lot. It was consistently expressed. Whereas with Tyson, what you see is it inconsistently expressed.
Got it.
So that was the difference. But I do appreciate that your model isn't like an AI model where it's like trying to just please all the time. Cause you know, I mean, I was just trying to make fun and make a joke out of it. Your model has your sensibilities because it's, you made it.
Exactly.
You know, so,
that's right.
So yeah, we got to trust that.
Yes. Malachi Fields was one that, I'll be honest, going back to the model hates Malachi Fields. Does not like Malachi Fields.
Sure.
And so I really, I love when this kind of thing happens when you come on, because we need to get the pro argument, the better side of this, so that we can make better decisions. Because again, this is just one input. This is just one side of the coin with these players. And so talk to me about Fields, because you seem to be pretty high on him.
I am. And it's funny because he's the guy I look at and go, yeah, if there's a guy I'm going to miss on, it might be him. But like my model and how I look at it, how I evaluate, likes him a lot, as a top 5 player on the board. And a lot of it has to do with compensatory factors. He's not unbelievably fast, but he does have that short area burst. He does have the short area quickness. You can see it expressed in his game in positive ways, not just as an athlete, but as a route runner. You see really sharp breaks. And even if you're separate, even if you're not getting initial separation in your stem, but then when you break inside or outside or back to the ball and the defender just loses you, and it's big time separation, that's worthwhile to me. You don't have to get that separation before the ball's thrown. You got to get it late in the route. And if you're doing it in a technically sound way, and you have the athletic skills that mimic those movements, and it's backed up by good athletic scores on top of that, that says to me, okay, I'm not just seeing a good technique guy. I'm seeing a good athlete in these areas performing these skills. And that compensates because as a route runner, it's about early separation more often than it is about late separation. Because the quarterback's got to make a decision at the top of the stem. So if you have good burst, acceleration, and good change of direction early, and you get off the line early and you're ahead, quarterback's going to throw you the ball. And then with that big body and strong frame and the good hands, that's good. And then after the catch, he makes multiple defenders miss in tight spaces. He's powerful and he's agile. So when you combine the route running, the positioning to the football, which is pretty good, could get a little better. And then you talk about the, after the catch skills. I like him, it works for me. I just, we'll see we'll see how it works out. I mean, because again, 4.65 is a low thing, even though if it was like, if they were, I'd love to see when he ran in order of Carnell Tate, because if all the scouts were joking or saying, hey, I had him at 0.2 different than this, and the error rate for the machine is 0.2, not that the humans were going to have less error rates than the machine, but still, you look at all that and I go, it'd be kind of funny if they ran back to back in this combine and the machine was kind of off and he actually runs a 4.45. All I know is that like at the Senior Bowl, Dave Kluge was talking about it. I was at the Senior Bowl, and one thing that we noticed very clearly was that on the field as a route runner in situations that you could accurately assess what was good route running and not just two-way goes in the slot where it's advantageous to the receiver and you can make up any old thing in that practice and it doesn't fit what's going to translate. Outside of those things, they said Malachi Fields looked like the best receiver on the field for both practices. So we'll see. Yeah.
He, I will say that one of his 3 comps in the late round prospect guide is actually a favorable one, and it was Michael Pittman. And Pittman was someone that the model wasn't very high, isn't very high on, because I've iterated it and changed it since he came out. But there's at least an outcome, from analytically with this, where it's just like, oh, this is just kind of a blind spot. This is just a player that it just might not catch. So it's good to hear the other side of the argument with him. Casey Concepcion is it feels like Harmon publishes his reception perception, and it feels like everyone's been just talking about Concepcion this week now. From my perspective, he checks a lot of boxes, like looks very, very good. I love watching him too. Where are you at with Concepcion? Do you see him as a super fun player as well?
I do. He was, I liked him as a freshman at NC State very much. I thought he was a savvy football player. Watching him at Texas A&M, the only, explosive, very quick twitch, skilled at being able to create in open space and also in traffic. He's a good route runner. He can get separation, get open. You can work in the zones. He can win the ball in the air. The only real flaw with his game that may get magnified early on is catching the football. He's a clap attacker at times, and it's always away from his frame when he has to use overhand position, either high or wide from his frame. Those are the two types of targets where he drops them. And, he's got to address that. If he can, he could be elite in the area that he's in with the right offensive fit. If he can't fix that, then he's going to be kind of a Cortland Sutton type of player who's like not, last year was his best year, but like good enough that you're drafting him and considering him as a bargain when he can be a bargain, but you're avoiding him when the ADP is too high.
Right. Right. Cause the ceiling isn't necessarily hitting for that. Yeah. I got you. All right, let's just kind of rapid fire some wide receiver names and get some thoughts on them. Again, there's just a lot of dudes, right? Like there's a lot of interesting players, and there's a lot of different archetypes, I think, too, in this class that are not. It's just like a choose your own adventure kind of situation with this class. Omar Cooper's getting first round buzz now. It sounds like it's kind of locked in from the way that a lot of mocks are going and such, like in the early 20s at this point. When I launched the guide, I think he had early second round capital. But what about Omar Cooper?
In a different class that was higher at the top, he'd still be that early second round capital guy. I mean, there's so many comps to him being Deebo Samuel, but he's 20 pounds lighter than Deebo Samuel.
Yes.
So let's chill on Deebo Samuel as the comp necessarily, just because he's not going to be that good after the catch. Maybe Roddy White could. That's a name from the past. Big, strong receiver who could, but he was a better route runner. He's a better route runner than Deebo as well. So I think he's a top 10 receiver, and I think he's a guy that can probably contribute early, if not start in the right situation, and maybe even thrive with good receivers around him.
Yeah, Rashee Rice was a comp analytically for him, where again,
makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't think Rice is like overly special, but you get him in the right spot, he's going to dominate in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Chris Brazzell, talk to me about him.
I like him. I know that people are like, they logo scout programs.
Yeah. I mean, look, to be fair, Tennessee's been frightening with some of these.
They have. You look at what is his name? Jalen
Hyatt.
Jalen Hyatt. Josh Palmer was the most productive.
Justin Hunter back in the day, but it wouldn't have been the same. Regime.
But even Josh Palmer wasn't the same regime as Hyatt. And then the Browns guy that was
Cedric Tillman.
Tillman, thank you.
Yeah.
He was kind of in the middle of two different formats. The other thing too is that Brazzell's played for Tulane before that. Right. So we can't just say that he was raised by the Tennessee scheme.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that he still had good things on tape there too. So I think he's a better route runner than what he's had to show at Tennessee. And even if he isn't knows the tree as well and has to learn more of the route tree, what he does, he performs well technically. And so the results I think will follow. I like him. I think that he will eventually become a starter.
Yeah, I mean he's that like alien frame, right? In his ability, is just, you watch him, you're like, how is this body doing this? Right?
He wins the George Pickens lookalike contest out of the three contestants that are in this draft.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
You know how it's never really about where you're going, it's about who you're going with? Like, the destination could be totally average, but if the right people are there, it becomes a great memory. Toyota really gets that. Toyota designs vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who bring everyone together and somehow make the drive part of the fun. There's room for all the stuff that comes with togetherness: luggage, golf clubs, camping gear, plus comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that lets everyone relax. And Toyota's lineup makes it easy to find your match. The RAV4 is perfect for everyday adventures. The Grand Highlander brings serious space for up to 8 with generous legroom and expansive cargo space. The Highlander also has space for up to 8. It's ready for big moments and spontaneous ones, balancing style and flexibility. And the Sienna is built for everyday life: carpools, road trips, snacks, spills. And it even has a built-in vacuum for when things get a little too messy. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
For adults with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms, every choice matters. Tremfya offers self-injection or intravenous infusion from the start. Tremfya is administered as injections under the skin or infusions through a vein every 4 weeks, followed by injections under the skin every 4 or 8 weeks. If your doctor decides that you can self-inject Tremfya, proper training is required. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Explore what's possible. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Chris Bell, who's got a very thick frame, more of that AJ Brown frame, if you will. Where are you at with Chris Bell?
Yeah, he's the high end comp for me too. Is AJ Brown, but he's the player most likely that I'm the most scared to draft, and I'm the most scared not to draft at the same time.
I hear that.
Because he has lots of lapses with concentration, with technique, with concepts. But then you watch him make a play. And you're like watching that speed on display with that size, watching him make catches that you say, okay, can you do that more often? Getting open with routes that you go, okay, you showed me that you know how to do some of this stuff. Can you start doing it more often? Like, in situations where, you clearly should have done it and you didn't. He's in that kind of tier where the injury might actually be a good thing for fantasy GMs, because you might be able to get him later and you didn't have to reach for him, because if he was healthy and he was a first round pick, that would be a bigger risk. But as a mid to late second round pick, maybe, if the well starts to run a little bit dry, you're shooting for the upside.
Yeah, totally get that. Skylar Bell, you seemed like you were pretty high on Bell in the RSP. I liked him too. I thought that he had a pretty interesting profile. So talk about him a little bit.
Most clap attackers I don't like. The only clap attackers I've like serial clap attackers, not just Cortland Sutton lapses clap attack. Everyone has those types of lapses, but guys who almost every play, it seems like they're clapping it or trapping it to their body. Most guys don't work out. The 4 guys that I saw that did were, Early Doucette, Terry McLaurin, Golden Tate, and Marvin Harrison Sr. And you look at that profile and you go, what do they have in common? And I'd say most of them, what they had in common is that they could use good technique when they had to, except for Terry. I think half of them could. Early and Golden Tate could. Marvin Harrison Sr. rarely did. He was catching balls like he was a 1978 wide receiver, like he was Ahmad Rashad or something. Like he valued his game after that. Probably did. And then the same thing goes, looking at Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is like, he's like a bumblebee, like from a standpoint of physics, he shouldn't be able to fly. But he flies very well. That's what he's like as a pass catcher. Like it should not happen. Skylar Bell's kind of like that. But the thing is that the guys who usually stink, who fail in the league because they can't because of their clap attacks is that when they actually tried in college to use proper technique, they couldn't do it. So they reverted back to the clap attack, and you'll see them every once in a while try it and go, "Oh, that's too scary. I can't do that." Skylar Bell actually can use good technique, but he chooses to clap attack, and he does it at a rate that his drop rates aren't as bad as most serial clap attackers are. So I'm willing to go the extra mile and say, all right, it's a gamble, folks, but I'm going to say he's going to be the exception to the rule here. And when you look at what he does at the catch point with difficult throws, and he wins it that way, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to throw out the whole clap attack bottle with this type of thing and give him the chance here, because he fits the model of guys who've proven it. And then on top of all that, it's like his elusiveness, his ability in the open field. Mm-hmm. He makes some plays that you're like, that's borderline absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Elijah Surratt? He's interesting, 0-star recruit, goes to St. Francis, and then kind of, James Madison, and then does the Indiana thing, and he just got better every year. But what kind of player do you see in him?
If everything clicks for him, he might be able to approach what Michael Wilson did last year. But more likely he's going to be more like Josh Palmer. I think he's a well-built possession receiver. He'll give you some plus yardage plays every once in a while. If you put him in a situation where he gets play action and delivers a double move or some sort of misdirection play. But I think overall, he's not as sudden of a mover. I think he's just beginning to grasp the nuances of route running that he's going to have at the NFL level, and he's going to continue to have to work at that. He's going to be better at zone coverage, reading the field, and just finding openings. And he's okay after the catch. He's decisive downfield and patient. But he's kind of a high floor, medium, high ceiling guy.
Yeah.
So 600 to 800 yards is what you're probably looking at for him most years.
Denzel Boston getting a lot of first round love. Do you think that he is in that conversation, or are you lower than that?
I'm going to say yes and yes to both questions.
Nice high variance.
I know it's the problem is this is where rankings suck. Okay.
Yeah. So, I remember we had that discussion
we
a couple
did.
Years ago. Yeah.
He's a perfect
terrible.
example of rankings suck, because I'm ranked 14th, but it's only because there are two things dragging him down. He had an injury that required enough rehab and games missed that I had to mark him down for injury. And his vision as a runner, because of the routes that he gets, I didn't get to see enough of him as a runner to give him credit for being something that he might be.
Yeah.
If those two things were different, he'd be at least wide receiver 6 on my board.
Yeah.
So I told people on my comments, if you take him as a top 5 receiver, I have no argument for you. He's consistent. He's a good player at the catch point. He runs decent routes for what you're asking him to do. He's got good size. He's not bad after the catch, at all. He's competent, at least. I just didn't get to see enough of him in that avenue to give him the full credit. And I just don't like cheating on it, even if it's, that way. I'd rather just tell you, I've got him at wide receiver 14, but I can easily see how he was graded 2 or 3 points higher, and he would have ended up at wide receiver 5.
His comp list, the one that aligned almost perfectly, was Jaden Higgins from last year, where it just kind of overlaid and just looked like that. But I had if you were to think of spectrum, it was sort of the same. I mean, Higgins, Cortland Sutton spectrum, that avenue. It's almost like and look, Tedero McMillan was on that analytically for me last year, but it was like a higher end version of that. It was like just an easier kind of buy-in than what we're getting with Boston.
Sure.
Okay. I'm glad to see that there's agreement there. 2 more. And then I know this is a marathon, but I just love hearing your thoughts.
We're having fun.
Jeremy Bernard, who didn't have didn't have a great production profile. Wasn't horrible, but wasn't phenomenal. But what do you see in him?
He's a weird player.
I mean, what's funny is you look at his analytical comps and you get Paris Campbell, that kind of I don't really know where this guy fits on this, and
I'm going to give you the slower versions of I don't know where this guy fits, and they do it differently than Paris. Alan Hearns, Tyler Johnson, at the best, Stevie Johnson, if he really knocks it out of the park. Yeah. You know, Stevie Johnson's like the ugly duckling superstar as a route runner. Yeah. You know, so I hate to compare him there. But maybe if it gets more smoothed out and his game really rounds out, maybe Robert Woods.
You know? Do you think that he's hopefully lands in a spot where he can see some manufactured stuff? Like it's more that, like, cause again, a lot of the stuff that I like, Mohamed Sanu was one for him that I got.
That's a good,
and I remember talking to Harmon about this actually, and he was like, "Oh, Sanu is perfect." And I'm like, "Okay, good."
Yeah,
and then
he's right.
But then you also get like Lynn Bowden types, you know, like guys where you're just like I don't know what to do with this guy.
Yeah, he's closer to a Sanu than he is a Bowden. That's for sure. But I think that he's, you know, overall, you're probably getting a guy who get him in a system where that fits well with his game and give him some time to acclimate and improve. And you're probably getting a capable starter who's a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in fantasy in his peak years. But he's got a hidden trapdoor in his game. And that's because he has difficulty with tight coverage. And I think that's what separates wide receiver 1s and high-end wide receiver 2s from the rest of the pack. Yeah. And I don't know if he's going to get better at that because there's a lot of more detail in this game that he has to learn.
Yeah. All right. The last wide receiver I want to throw out there, and then you can throw out some random ones as you do. Zachariah Branch is, you know, it's funny. We talked about Burden last year. I remember having the conversation with you where people were like, "Oh, this is a Wan'Dale Robinson usage and blah, blah, blah." So Zach Branch has Wan'Dale Robinson collegiate usage, tons of screens, tons of low ADOT stuff. The difference, and if you look at the list of day 2 wide receivers who had similar screen and, you know, manufactured touch profiles, there's been 2, if you want to call it hits. You know, I mean, I think the Luther Burden trajectory is on the right trajectory that had that usage, right? I'm not saying that that's the way they are as players, but the usage in college, right?
Yeah.
And the 2 that were hits were Wan'Dale Robinson and Luther Burden, but both of them had really, really good age adjusted production. Like both of them were phenomenal producers in college. Every other one that you run into on this list is just bust after bust after bust. It's the Mecole Hardman, Anthony Schwartz, you know, Malachi Corley, Kadarius Toney, and it just gets scary. And that's where I'm at with Branch, where like, you know, maybe this is the way I'm seeing it. So I'm throwing this out and I'm prefacing with this because I really want to hear your thoughts on it. But like, it feels like, yeah, maybe there's a coach out there, a Mike McDaniel or something who could do something really fun with Branch. But anytime I get to a point, and I've learned this through the years, at least with the way I'm evaluating, anytime I get to the point where I'm trying to like make really specific excuses or say you even just using the word fun, you know, as for a prospect, I'm like, is the ceiling really there? Like, is it like maybe if you squint, you could see like the Tyreek Hill trajectory or something, but it just gets really scary to me when you start to make those edge cases for a player like this. So talk about Zachariah Branch. Like, am I wrong in thinking about it this way? Or is it like, can he develop into something more? Or is it just like, this is probably a gadgety type player at the next level?
I would say the safe bet is to consider him a gadgety type player at the next level. But the only reason is that his route running leaves a lot to be desired. And he's got to work on that. That's the big thing, is that he just has, you know, they're good enough to get on the field, the routes, but not good enough to remain on the field every down. You know, there's just not refinement. There's not competent execution at every phase of the route, from the release to the stem to the break. There's some issues. He's like if routes were like a sales strategy, he'd be like a salesman with a product, but without a sales strategy. You know, like that's basically what it is. It's strange. Or it's like, I'm charming, so you should buy something from me. Right. You know, or I'm good looking, you should buy something from me. And it's like, it doesn't quite work that way, except maybe in the pharmaceutical field. I don't know. But, anyway, sorry. I just couldn't help it. But you know, I know. But the whole situation is yes, there's an upside for him if he gets his routes together, that maybe he could give you some Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith type of play.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Be around those ranges. But I'm more inclined to believe that he's probably better off as a punt return special or kick return specialist and occasional gadget guy. And I don't know if the routes are going to get to where they need to be. If they do, he's a boom bust player. He's probably the biggest boom bust player in the middle rounds of the NFL draft or your fantasy draft.
Yeah, that's good, because I'm seeing that too. Because even like the model doesn't like despise him, because some of the production's okay. It's just when you really look under the hood, it's like, oh, this is how this is kind of coming together.
He gets drafted on a Rams or the Lions or a team like that. Say goodbye. If he gets drafted in Cleveland, and they change to a one tight end set, you might have something there. You might also have utter disaster. You just don't know. But like say a different team than Cleveland, but you know what I'm saying. A team that like needs a receiver. He might be okay. Like I don't even want to mention some of the bad teams because they'll come to mind.
I heard it coming.
I kind of vomited in my mouth a little bit as I was talking. Sorry.
I know. That's what I'm so nervous about. Like some of these, I mean, some of the landing spots are pretty bad for these wideouts this year, but that's why we're just talking about them as prospects right now. We don't have to worry about that at the moment. All right. Weeks. As many wide receivers you want to throw out there, just random darts or guys we haven't talked about that you think should be on our radar.
Sure. Let's look at the fun list here. It's I would say, all right, moving forward, who first comes to mind? Antonio Williams is fun. I know that he's, I think he's kind of a Jaden Reed type of player.
He got a McConkey comp in the model. And I'm not saying that because the model didn't know what to do with Ladd McConkey totally, right? It was just like
that was the top of my list.
Okay.
Was Ladd McConkey. He's the aspirational comp. Jaden Reed's kind of more the mid-tier comp.
Yep.
Yeah. So I liked him too. I'm with you. Josh Cameron out of Baylor. Lots of tools. He's got to learn how to make them work. He can run though. If there's a Mohamed Sanu guy for me, it was kind of him. But in that sphere of AJ Brown, Anquan Bolden, and Mohamed Sanu, he could be a higher end Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah.
All right. Let's dig a little bit deeper here on guys.
Josh Cameron got one of his was for mine was Michael Wilson, just because Michael Wilson's so much bigger than we think, and that was probably because Cameron's a big boy. Like he's stout. Like he's a very well built, wide out and interesting. So I understand the Sanu call out there.
Yeah. He's got running back skills. Right. Yeah, for sure. Right. So yeah, he's certainly in that range. Eric McAllister could be fun because he's that contested catch guy. He's Miss Congeniality in the George Pickens lookalike contest, pageant, but he's got to learn more route skills to get there. But I think he's not as far away as people think.
McAllister is an interesting call because he actually because I have breakout score in my model, which is age adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempts. It's the main metric at wide receiver that I use. His was top 5 in the class, McAllister. When you get Tyson and Lemon and Tate and Concepcion, and then there's Eric McAllister. There's some off the field stuff that I think might bring his draft capital down a little bit, but it's good to see when you get someone who's approaching it in a completely different way that's coming up with at least a similar this guy's interesting conclusion. It's always something to keep in mind.
For sure. J. Michael Sturdivant, I watched him 3 years ago at Cal, and I was like, ooh, this guy could be pretty compelling. Then I watched him at UCLA, and I'm like, it's kind of less compelling because of how he's being used. And then he was at Florida's dumbed down system for how they did things, and he was reduced to a lot less compelling of a player. But I think athletically, he's also another guy that could probably turn into something more. I think there's more to his game than the past two teams utilized. So he's kind of intriguing. Lots of people are going to talk about Bryce Lance and Ted Hurst, and I certainly think that those guys could get there. But, I've got a lot more to say about Bryce Lance as what he cannot do right now. And I think he could get there, but there's a little bit of work ahead. if I'm going
to, the other thing with him too is that he's an older prospect, which makes it a little bit more difficult for that, to come to fruition. So yeah. So there's things to like, but it's a little mixed. If I'm going to pick a player that we've mentioned Wan'Dale Robinson a number of times. If this guy had Wan'Dale Robinson draft capital, I think he'd be better than Wan'Dale. And that's Junior Vander Ross III of Toledo. Tough player at the catch point, better down the field than Wan'Dale. Just didn't have the draft capital, but he's a deep sleeper. I think, 5'9", 5'8", 182, kind of in that Greg Dortch, Wan'Dale Robinson, QT sort of thing. I think it could be, if he had the right draft capital, he'd have a chance to have a better start than Wan'Dale did to his career, but he's going to need a little luck on his side to get there. All right. I'll mention a few more just for fun. All right. So Eric Rivers of Georgia Tech, he's kind of a Josh Downs, Jamison Crowder type of player. Good runner after the catch. He contributes well from the slot. He's kind of a situational producer that might be compelling on the right team. Chase Roberts is kind of a Tim Patrick, Eric Decker mashup. He's really good blocker, not very fast, but he can catch. And the two guys I'm kind of interested in seeing just as an evaluator, want to see them make noise in camp, not necessarily for fantasy. If they do fantasy, that would be great. LeMake Brockington of Minnesota, who's like on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Yeah, I think he can squat an elephant, something like that. With Mark Henry on top of the elephant. I don't know, something along those lines. But he's kind of a Quintez Cephas type of player, like big, strong. Like strong for his size, good at the catch point. Gets open, but not especially fast, and a good runner after the catch. So I think maybe he could be better than it looks. We'll see. Jalen Walthall of Incarnate World. Yeah. Okay. And he was a combine invite. So I looked at his stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah. He's kind of in that Jerry Jeudy, Torrey Holt kind of range of player, but he's got more catch point skill. For some reason, every time I think of him, I think of Laurent Robinson, but I know that they don't match up well, but the way they play, he's just very good at the catch point.
Weeks in the NFL.
Yeah. Just goes up and gets it, very smooth, very quick twitch. But he's like, 6'1", 191. And I bet that I bet he had weights in his back pocket when they weighed him. I don't know. Maybe he's adding more because at Incarnate Word, he probably also didn't have, I don't know what kind of thing they make other than, like Georgia Tech making the Iron Man suit, but he probably didn't have the greatest training facilities and workout programs to add the muscle either at an Incarnate Word. So he might be one of those guys that is a late bloomer. Yeah. And then the last one, Daniel Sopkowitz out of Illinois State. I joke about this a lot. I mentioned it on Chris Harris's podcast, but I'll mention it here. Brandon Lloyd was always a longtime favorite of mine as a pass catcher. I think he and Larry Fitzgerald are two of the best ever to make contested acrobatic plays.
Oh my gosh. Highlight reel after highlight reel catch.
Yeah. Like Brandon Lloyd was like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. I mean, like literally the things he did to catch the football were crazy. I've joked that if I somehow won the lottery and decided that I wanted to buy an island and call it RSP Island, it would be good because we donate to Darkness to Light. So if we had a name named after us, it would be the anti-Epstein Island. There you go. So that would be good. But the other thing that we do is we'd have the Brandon Lloyd RSP Acrobatic Catch Invitational. And we would do it like the slam dunk contest where we'd have one-on-ones though, and we'd have a pro and a college division. And so I think that Daniel Sopkowitz could be a dark horse in this college competition because sometimes it looks like he has arms sprout out from the sides of his body to catch footballs in tight coverage that really he should not be able to do. And he has the elements of good route running. He just has to develop a little bit more nuance with his craft in the stems, but he can break. He makes good breaks. He's got good size. He's like 6'2", 205, and he really can catch the football, other than like the one situation he needs to get a little stronger with his hands and his wrists and forearms when people hit him on the arms when he makes the catch. But when it comes to like coming out of crazy angles and spinning and turning and like getting position and somehow like taking your hand, and, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some dude jumps higher than him and he like somehow reaches down between some dude's legs and his hand comes out from like the guy's thigh and pulls the ball through. Like, he would be the guy I would bet to make that kind of catch in this class. So he definitely deserves some mentioning, because there's some with the route running there too. He's not I don't know if he's super fast, but he could maybe be an Adam Thielen type of surprise one day.
Man, no one in the fantasy football space does analogies like Matt Waldman. No one. And no one digs deeper than Matt Waldman either. I appreciate all the time, these marathon sessions that we do each year is always one of the highlights, if not the highlight of, the prospecting season for me. So I really appreciate your time, appreciate the insight, the information. Let everyone know where they can get the RSP, and what you're working on and all that good stuff.
Sure. You can find it at mattwaldman.com. If for some reason you have a problem getting access, you can email me at mattwaldmanrsp@gmail.com. I haven't had any real problems with it, but just in case it's, every time it's a new process, sometimes things can be like, I didn't understand how to get through here. I usually respond within 24 hours. Again, 21 years doing this. It's one of the 2 most purchased draft guides, from independent draft guide purveyors of, NFL people, according to folks like Alex Brown, who's been a head recruiter and met with scouts at Ole Miss, Rice, SMU, Houston, and he's now an Atlanta Falcons scout. So he knows, he kind of knows what people buy. Yeah. It's like the Beast and like if Dane Brugler's is the Beast and he does great work and he covers all the players. I joke mine's Godzilla. So we've got King Kong versus Godzilla, but in a friendly sort of way. Of course. But so it's good there. You can find that the post draft comes with it for the same price. You're getting this in the post draft where I re-rank players based on fit. I do a cheat sheet where I look at ADP. So when I look at somebody and I say, I was ahead on Patrick Mahomes or Nick Chubb or Lamar or whoever it was. And I can say, these were my number 1 players overall pre-draft. And I still have them number 1 overall, but you can draft them at 25th or 36th. And here's the number. Here's a formula that shows you the kind of the give you have to when you need to start drafting them and when it gets more dangerous for you getting sniped. So I show you things like that. And of course I work at footballguys.com. I've been there since 2009. And so, so I author stuff preseason and in season. I do rankings and commentary and all that stuff. And I have podcasts that I do. I have a profane podcast with Bob Harris, that I've convinced him to do. Now I've let the genie out of the bottle and I don't know if we can put it back in, called Feel It or F It. We do that every Monday and that's a favorite. And then I have a podcast with Adam Harstead during the year where we talk about Dynasty, and everybody knows how smart Adam Harstead is. And he comes up with some really great stuff in terms of models and looking at things and questioning stuff. Adam's great. And then of course there's Brandon and I doing our show Going Deep. So those are the things that you can usually get either much of the off season and definitely during the season. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. No, I look, again, I appreciate it. And I say this every year, but I think that, if anyone's consuming the late round prospect guide, that's obviously going to be analytics heavy. It's a great companion to just go look at the RSP because you're getting a completely different perspective and angle at looking at these guys. And I mean, so far, this is our 3rd year doing this. And it seems like when we have alignment on players, it's a good, even when it takes a year, like Kamani Vidal, even when it doesn't happen right away, it eventually gets there, right? Never wrong, as you say.
Just early, joke. I mean, like I joke with that because the 2 guys that people were like, you certainly are a staunch, true believer on these 2 players. Like 3 years ago, I've heard this a lot, were Michael Wilson and Rico Dowdle. And last year, so like in my ad at Football Guys, I literally had them use Michael Wilson. It's the first time I've used a veteran to talk about a rookie guide, but I just had to do that because I was like, this guy's like Michael Thomas. If he gets the opportunity, he gives you Michael Thomas vibes. And Rico Dowdle, every year I'd go, listen, you don't have to add him, but just know this is the 4th year in a row that the Cowboys chose to keep him. There's a reason for that. You know, if he gets
that coach just got him in Pittsburgh now too.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, this was a guy that, you know, those are the types of things that, you know, the late round draft guide and the RSP give you value with, is that you can look at these things later and go, all right, I've got a luxury to add on waivers, or it's the middle of the season, injuries happen. What do they have to say about this guy? Maybe I should keep this, and it's a little more evergreen than I thought. And that's what people realize about these types of guides. So it's always a pleasure doing this with you. It's one of the highlights of draft season, is getting a chance to chop it up with you, because you're such a smart guy and you're engaging in what you do, and you provide such good analysis. And it's fun to hear the analytical side of things in a nuanced way that, you know, gives us methods of conversation. And I know people have really loved us getting together. So it's been a joy.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. As always, guys, check out lateround.com. Check out the Late Round Prospect Guide. Make sure you're subscribed to both the YouTube channel and anywhere you can get your podcasts. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Hey guys, it's Erin Andrews. Everything these days is fighting for your attention. We've got work, family, social media, making it tough to figure out what to prioritize. I got something that should always be at the very top of the list: your breast health. In fact, if you're 40 and over, you should be getting screened once a year. And if you're under 40, it's never too soon to visit yourattentionplease.com to learn about breast cancer risk. Come on now. Pay the girls some attention and take the time to find out your breast cancer risk at yourattentionplease.com. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
I'm Daniel Jeremiah.
And I am Greg Rosenthal.
I know that, Greg. We're teaming up on 40s and Free Agents, the podcast that owns the NFL offseason.
This is where teams are built. Free agency, the combine, pro days, trades. Every move matters.
From my draft boards and mock drafts
to my vaunted top 101 free agents and how rosters come together.
Quarterback movement,
surprise signings.
We'll tell you what it means and who really wins. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search 40s and Free Agents, and listen now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.